Okay, Professor Jacoby, what are the key challenges of climate studies in your view?
Well, I'm giving a talk about this tomorrow, and I have chosen 3 areas that are challenges, particularly for this kind of group, which is concerned with analytical matters, with the studies of economic studies using the GTAP system and the GTAP database and the like. And I think that we're in an evolving situation that's presenting new challenges, and I picked 3. One is, I think, the people who are doing this kind of economic work need to develop a lot more of their time and effort to integrating with the science, a closer interaction of the people working on the science and the people working on the economics. That's the first one. The second is that the political environment in which we're working is changing substantially. We're no longer in a Kyoto Protocol type of world, which has dominated a lot of the work that we did, a lot of the modeling that was done. We're in a much more of a fractured kind of a process, and with policies being determined not at an international level, but at very local levels, produces different kinds of modeling challenges. I'm going to talk about that. The third is that I think that we have to have a lot more concern with not just with international or national level analysis, which is natural with the GTAP system, but more work on the integration with the internal effects within countries, because a lot of the important economic matters are between different regions of large countries, and we need to have better ways of analyzing that. Those are the 3 challenges that I will talk about.
Good. You mentioned the first challenge, the need to integrate economics with science, but focusing on economics, which really plays a key role in determining policy responses to climate change, both from the mitigation and from the adaptation perspective. Where are the gaps, in your opinion, in the economics of climate change, and where do you see any scope for improvement to properly address such a big challenge?
Well, I think we understand a lot about the economics of mitigation. We do know a lot about the economics of mitigation. Our problem is political in actually taking some action. The biggest problems that we have in our economic understanding and the ability to do the economic analysis is that we don't understand the effects of climate change that are coming. We know a good deal about the energy system. We know a good deal about agriculture. We can do some reasonable analysis, I think, of what's involved economically in reducing greenhouse gas emissions. The biggest challenge is that we don't really have very good ways of summarizing what all the economic and sociological and ecological effects are of the climate change, which we're going to have to deal with, and that is the biggest challenge, I think, because then it's very hard to add the benefits and the costs because we don't have the ability to analyze the benefits.
And concerning your second challenge and somehow the governance of climate change internationally, what do you envisage as a likely future direction for climate policy architecture, both internationally or regionally?
Well, I wish I were more optimistic about that. I think we're in a circumstance where individual countries are taking their individual policies in a very fractured kind of way. So I think we are seeing some gradual policies in developing countries. There are a number of things that are taking place in as they pursue economic policies. But I'm afraid in the near term, next 4 or 5 years, we're not going to have a coordinated international agreement. We seem to be deadlocked on that. So I don't think we're completely stopped in terms of the policies to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. But politically, we're not in a situation where we're very close to any kind of a broad international agreement. So I'm not very optimistic about what's going to take place in South Africa at the next Framework Convention meeting. We don't yet have the political conditions for a broad international context, international agreement. So most of what's going to take place is going to take place within countries and perhaps in some bilateral arrangements. It's not a happy answer, but I'm afraid that's where we are.
And focusing on energy and its interaction with climate policies, what are, in your view, the key issues that must be addressed by the international community in the energy sector, and which are the energy choices that are more likely to meet the need of a more sustainable world?
Well, I think that we have a serious problem, as was discussed this morning in the session here, with the use of biofuels as a sustainable solution. I think that we have not really fully understood the implications of the biofuel. I think the biofuel revolution. I also think that there are serious issues that are raised by the what appears to be the rejection in Europe and other countries of nuclear power. So if biofuels is creating a number of serious issues, and if nuclear power is not going to be, we cannot find an acceptable way to do nuclear power. That's very serious. So I think in terms of economic and technological development, developing biofuels that are not competing with food supplies is crucially important, and it's being very slow in development. And I think finding ways to use nuclear and other types of sources that are not producing CO2 emissions is very important. So the fact of rejection, I think, is going to create serious problems for the greenhouse problem. Beyond that, efficiency and reducing our intensity of energy use, and that's always there, always to be worked on. Of course, is probably the largest potential source of reduction.
And what do you expect from shale gas?
In the near term, meaning in the next 2 or 3 decades, I think that the gas, the development of this the development of the technology for exploiting this gas resource, which is always known it was there, but we've developed the technology for producing that gas. So we just finished a large study of this at M.I.T, which just completed last week. Of the effect of shale gas on the United States, and it essentially has a substantial change in the U.S. outlook for energy. So the short conclusion of that study is that gas can be a sort of a bridge to the future. That gas, the switching to gas away from coal, perhaps away from oil, can have a substantial reducing effect on greenhouse gas emissions for some period of decades. And it gives us some time, perhaps, to develop these other technologies. The argument we make is that this additional gas supply in the U.S. and elsewhere in the world, it is, as they say, a bridge to the future. But it's very important that we continue to work on what's at the other end of the bridge, that we not build a bridge that just stops in midair. And so continuing to work on issues like renewable technologies, nuclear power, other types of technologies, carbon capture and storage, all those things are crucially important. But gas is going to help a lot in the short run, particularly in the United States. But also, we don't really know much about this resource in the rest of the world, although there appears to be a lot of it. We don't know much about its cost yet.
Technological innovation and research and development will, of course, need a huge amount of investment. Do you believe that international financial markets will be able to generate the resources needed to support these new energy policies in the transition to a low-carbon world?
Well, there are really 2 issues here. One is the fundamental science, the fundamental research and development, which is really not a matter of energy markets, it's a matter of government policies. So one of the questions is the financial crisis going to have a substantial effect on R&D by the various agencies in the countries that fund this kind of work? The U.S., Europe, Japan, Brazil, many other countries that do this kind of fundamental development. And at least in the U.S., the answer to that is it has not. It has the R&D in these areas goes on. R&D generally has quite strong bipartisan support. So the fundamental science, I think, goes on. The fact of economic recession and its effect on the development of individual technologies like carbon capture and storage or nuclear or these other things, I don't think that's a major problem. We're talking about a problem which is many decades to a century problem, and we are coming slowly out of this recession and out of the financial crisis. And I think that the issue is the future is determined not so much by the business cycle, which is we're in, but whether or not we can come to some sort of coordinated policy, putting a price on greenhouse gas emissions, some kind of a coordinated policies to go directly at the emissions. It's the business cycle is really a minor part of the problem.
Okay, thank you very much.